Oh, just listen to that. I love this music. So nostalgic, you can't replace times like these. The Nintendo Entertainment System. It was my first gateway into the video game realm. It was many others as well. I can't imagine living in a time without video games. I was so lucky to grow up at the beginning of time where we could interact with the world of someone else's imaginations. So yes, of course I am dedicating a list of my top 25 personal favorite Nintendo games of all time. So you get the gist, so I don't have to go into any rules, but I do have one reminder before I begin, is that the internet did not raise me with the Nintendo. My childhood did. So this list is going to get unpredictable compared to other Nintendo lists you'll find on the internet. Just a heads up. Other than that, let's get started. Ninja Gaidens 1 and 2 are awesome games and in my top 50 games, but it had their big problems. Unfair respawning enemies and spawning point locations, the knockback is merciless, and it had some difficulty spikes and level design issues. Ninja Gaiden 3, on the other hand, easily has the most polish out of the three and balances out the hard difficulty with refined mechanics. It feels fun, it's really energetic, and it encourages strategic movement with your reflexes. And most important, it's fair. You could really see the improvements from the other titles. However, it still does have problems, which is why I pulled it down to number 25. You take double damage from the other Ninja Gaiden games for some weird reason. The soundtrack and levels get a little dull in the second half in my opinion, and the long checkpoints get on my nerves. But otherwise, awesome game. I really recommend it. Remember me saying my childhood raised me on the NES and not the internet? Yeah, this is an unpopular internet choice. First off, this game is flawed. It's flawed, it's so bad. I should not like this game, but I do. I tried everything I could not to put it on here, but I couldn't. It's so charming and I love it because they expanded on that last stage from Donkey Kong and built on it to make it interesting. The concept here is to drop down hamburger ingredients from one level to another to stack them and win the level. And it is challenging, for better and for worse. Let's talk about the for worse side. The enemies are relentless and are making a beeline for you all the time. Imagine that you're playing tag with 6 people, maybe more, being it and that they're coming after you. At some times, it's fun to outwit that many enemies, but on the other hand, it is constantly stress-inducing. It's a very fun but somewhat bittersweet experience, but not a game I'd recommend to a lot of gamers. It has flaws. Proceed with caution if you want to try it out. Remember Scooby-Doo from the Sega Genesis list? So of course I'm not going to leave out Maniac Mansion on the NES. I love these point-and-click adventure games. The first thing that immediately sticks out about this game is its ambition and options as an NES title. Yeesh, how did they pull this off on limited hardware? I'm impressed. This is a game that involves interacting with a mansion to rescue somebody. But there's a catch. It's a mad scientist mansion. Everyone and everything in this mansion is either neglected, doesn't make sense, and mad scientist inventions. It adds to the mystery. You have to put your ingenuity cap going about this place and solving its riddles. It's a fun stumper and puzzler. Oh, I miss games like these from the old days. The downside is that once you beat the game and discover its many secrets, just like Scooby-Doo and the Genesis, the replayability goes way down, which is why I pulled it down to number 23. This is a very polarizing game for me. I love it very much, but I also hate it very much. Don't let the appeal of the lighthearted concept fool you. This game gets ridiculously hard, ridiculously fast. So the goal of this game is to collect all of the diamonds and then reach the goal. Seems simple enough, but the intricacies behind the mechanics will make this game super fun, but also a trial and error disaster. This is a game for puzzle solvers and fast reaction time gamers, no buts otherwise. What I will give it credit for is its solid concept, execution, and the way the game gets you to think. It's one of those games where when you struggle so much against a puzzle then finally solve it, it feels so good. This is a weird one to recommend. I'd say give it a shot because of its charm and concept, but don't be surprised if the game starts kicking down your wall of pride from the get-go on level 4. Super fun, but also super challenging. Ooh, Trog is good. It's an underrated NES game that needs to see the light of day. Go grab a friend and have a ball with this one. What this game is about is to grab all of your dinosaur colors eggs while avoiding the cavemen that want to eat you. You can punch, grab power-ups like fireballs to burn them, or transform into a T-Rex, and you get the idea. It's pretty addictive and the gimmicks and obstacles keep changing up the gameplay, though there is a catch. After about level 20 or so I think, the game no longer has any new tricks to get to you and puts you into an endless mode. So you're likely to stop playing the game because, well, the game is done. It's one of those NES looping games. Really fun, don't get me wrong. But I pulled it down to number 21 because repetition, it doesn't help. Despite that, I urge you to try it. It's a charming game to play with someone like Bobble. I actually tried this game for the first time in this countdown in a long time. I remember a friend of mine playing this when I was around 9 years old. Eesh, that far back? My memory scares me sometimes. My verdict on it? It definitely has flaws, but I think its multiple pass concept is something it should be highly praised for, especially from the NES era. You're a one-man army tank progressing to an enemy base and options open up to take different routes to get there. Find one path too hard? Cool, try another one. The options and replayability is noteworthy. However, the game's controls are tanky and a bit unintuitive. Pun intended, thank you. There is BS with some spawning points from enemies, and it has trial and error. Gotta love NES days, but I'm impressed. Out of all the things I expected to go wrong since, let's face it, it's an experimental console, I was taken aback at how far it went to make it an exceptional experience on the Nintendo. It's really good. I enjoyed playing it for this countdown. Anyone remember the gun zapper? Why don't those things ever work? I swear, half the time I come across these things, they never work. Well, anyways, these two games, Duck Hunt and Wild Gunman, the two games I played with the zapper, weren't really big and full NES games per se, so I thought why not bunch these two games I played on the zapper in the same slot? Duck Hunt and Wild Gunman are self-explanatory. Ducks or guys pop up, you shoot them, but there is a unique charm behind it because it's a gun. And it's fun. What more do you need? Also, this is a side note, but gamers really hate the dog because he mocks you if you miss your shots. Really? I thought he was charming. To each their own. I did hear there's a mod where you can't shoot the dog. Huh, now I want to shoot him. That looks like fun. Lemmings was one of my favorites at my grandma's house when I played it with my cousins. It's a puzzle game where mindless creatures called lemmings will walk around aimlessly until you give them commands. The goal is to get them home, but they're impatient little buggers. They'll easily walk into death traps if you don't keep them busy. I guess that myth about them is true after all. For a puzzle gamer, yeah, I definitely recommend this. It's cute, it's charming, it can get difficult if you want it to be. It's got plenty of flavors to stand it out for some long, good tasting game sessions. I have to admit though, the reason I brought this down is because I happen to like the Sega Genesis port better. So being reminded of a better port that you could be playing is not good for the soul. It's kind of like a dog begging you for your food. It's just something you can't ignore. Surprise, surprise. What can I add to this? Everyone has this game on their top 10 Nintendo game lists. If there's one word I could describe Contra, it's precision. The controls and hitboxes are spot on. So now it comes down to you to hit your targets precisely while avoiding bullets precisely. That's the game. It sets a great standard for challenges because you only get 3 lives, unless you cheat. But regardless, it's well put together for whatever you want out of it. Plus, it's multiplayer, so you have someone to blame if you mess up. Don't give me that look, you know it's true. However, I do have some small gripes with the game. Some of the power-ups are not very good, like the fireballs, and you could accidentally pick up the wrong ones. The game is also short, it needs to be way longer. Yes, I know about Super C, which is another Contra game, but still, it's a game that's easy to master because the enemies, the bosses, the set pieces, and mechanics are all predictable. But I do agree with everyone who praises this game that it is worth trying and it has exceptional qualities in an NES title. Starting things off, I'm already at a disadvantage in talking about this game. The Angry Video Game Nerd, a YouTube game review legend, literally took a crap on this game. But I do have 2 rebuttals ready. Starting with 1, everyone has different tastes, so I could like something the AVGN doesn't, and vice versa. I don't hop on bandwagons. First off, I know exactly where the AVGN is coming from. The game has a horrendous frame rate, especially in spacious levels. The hit detection is very flaky. The game is long, so bad news for the AVGN if you planned on finishing it, and numerous other things. That being said, those things happen to not bother me in video games. I don't care about bad frame rates as long as it stays consistent. Despite the hit detection being bad, I found it very manageable from my perspective, but that's just me. On the positive side, I found it a very solid and fun platformer with a good variety to obstacles, the themes. I honestly had a hard time putting the game down because it was surprisingly fun. Now, reason number 2. This is the first video game I've ever played in my life. This is the very first video game I remembered playing as far back as I could recall in my life, being 3 years old. So yes, I do have a reason not to throw this game under the rug and forget it. That being said though, I don't have nostalgia for this game because I was too young to remember those feelings. Regardless though, I tried it out again for this countdown, I sat down, I played it, and I loved it. It feels good to love your first video game. This one I came across from Mike Matai's Top 20 Nintendo Games video from the AVGN channel, and it looked intriguing, so I gave it a go. It's a game that involves creating and destroying blocks to get the key, then get to the door to finish the level. And it's, to say in a single word, intricate. It's tough because you have to account for enemies and your reflexes to save your hide. And let me tell you, you get into a lot of close calls in this game. It's trial and error, but it's a good kind of trial and error. It encourages you to keep trying and the satisfaction of completing a level feels really good. It's like Boulder Dash, but it's a lot more satisfying and a lot less tedious. As for why it's number 15, phenomenal puzzle game. But I'm human, and I have my limits for the long run with a difficult game like this. If you plan on playing this, make sure to hit up A and B together at the same time on the game over screen so that you don't lose your progress. It'll be a lifesaver if you plan on getting far in this game. I do plan on completing it someday. It does look promising once I get the time. This one I had to step back for a bit and figure out why it's so popular. I don't like boxing, but yet I love the heck out of this game. It's not a platformer, an RPG, or anything we've seen before, and that's probably why it stands out so much in being unique in the NES library. It has personality, a unique execution, and come on, the charm, it just screams, play me. This is one of those cases where the trial and error concept is perfect. I remember getting addicted to this as a kid and kept getting stuck on some guys. The tiger guy, that's what I call him, bald bull with his brutal charges, the left-handed pink soda guy that threw me off, It felt so good to nail down their pattern, beat them down, and win the day. To my embarrassment, I still need to reach and defeat Mike Tyson. I got this game backlogged. I'm coming for you. Someday, game. Someday. This is another one I got recommended to, and oh, it's good. It's so good! How did this one slip under my radar after all these years? I've never heard about it until now. It's fast, it's fluid, and it works really well to its advantage to keep the pace on fire. Plus that soundtrack, oh man, that is beast. You can also play as other characters as you rescue them. The platforming is spot on. The environmental hazards and obstacles are so cool. Just listen to me fanboy here. Oh. However, I do have to admit that the trial and error can get hectic in some places, like the machines with the blue planet or the surging lava with the red planet. But it's not a big complaint, as the checkpoint system is very forgiving. My other small gripe is that it is a small game, which is why I pulled it down to number 13. It is a very solid game. I'm impressed. Very enjoyable. Go try it out. Couldn't recommend it more. Have you ever blown up internally wanting an underrated game to get more recognition with the world? Cabal is like that for me. This game needs to get out more. It's kind of a shooting into the screen version of Contra and shares a lot of similarities. You can die in one hit, it's 2 players, you can grab power-ups, and you have to watch your offensive and defensive stance playing the level or else you'll get ganged up on. Funny enough, it also has Contra's weaknesses. It is a short game, so once you master it, then it starts getting repetitive and safe on repeated playthroughs. I think the major advantage here is that you can choreograph yourself in Contra, but Cabal focuses more on improvising with the situation. That bit is where I think I enjoy playing Cabal over Contra. I prefer the more spontaneous gameplay here. Much like Punch-Out, I love Zelda 2 because there isn't another game like it. I love how the exploration is handled. I love how sophisticated the offensive and defensive moves are. And I love how it executes its platforming style. I guess I need to be blunt, but I don't care at all at how it compares to other Zelda games, and I don't want to. The point is that it is a bloody fantastic video game in its own right. The game has everything. Dungeons, collectibles, different variety of monsters, meaning different strategies, magic spells, awesome bosses. It's a plethora of mechanics ahead of its time in my opinion. My one gripe with it is what I talked about in the top 20 Zelda games, is that the end game with the Great Palace is just plain unforgiving. But overall, I cherish and love this video game. It's very dear to me. This is kinda cheating because this didn't see a release in America until with Super Mario All-Stars with the Super Nintendo, but it looked close enough to an NES game, so I decided to count it. So, confession time. I'm one of those gamers that gets bored of playing the same games over and over again, even if they're revolutionary games. If you've seen plenty of my countdowns, then you know I want fresh and new ideas. After playing the original Super Mario Bros., I'm not going to count, so many times, I'm tired and my spontaneous video game spirit wants something new. A true challenge for Mario fans. A breath of fresh air. Something to push my limits. I do understand where people are coming from and not liking this game because of the harder difficulty and cheap obstacles throughout the game. But I love it. I adore it. It keeps my hardcore and changing things up mindsets happy. In my opinion, it's better to be challenged rather than play a game you know you will predictably win every time. I do love the original, but I love when games freshen things up with new challenges. I've got a funny story to tell. This game deceptively looks like it's for kids or first time players because of its cute exterior, but it is not. It lies to you. I've seen plenty of people crash and burn from the surprisingly snappy gameplay this game endorses. Hardly anyone gets past the first level. It is fast and overwhelming at first, so this game does require some practice to get your bearings for new players. Past that, this is where the charm of the game soaks in. Consistently outwitting your obstacles and enemies just feels so great. There's a certain blood high that thrives from it to keep playing. However, it is a demanding game and it will wear you out, which is why I pulled it down a little bit. That's not a bad thing because it is very fulfilling in that regard. I definitely recommend this game and I love going back to it, but it does take a lot of concentration out of you by the end. I can't deny that. Unlike Chip and Dale, this is a game that anybody can pick up and play. It's also long, has 100 levels, has a nice checkpoint system, is simple, plenty of variety in the level and enemy design, it has a lot of charm, and it's 2 players. It's a game where just don't analyze it. It's a game that's supposed to be played and make you feel happy. It embodies the spirit of video games. As for me personally, I like the balance of how the low learning curve works with the innovation to keep experienced gamers happy. My nephew likes to play this game with me and it's easy to master, so that makes it enjoyable for him to play as well as I do. But at the same time, Bobble appeals to me because of the varying mechanics, level design, and difficulty. In my opinion, it's one of the essential 2-player experiences on the NES, period. I'm a sucker for games like this. Anything that falls from the ceiling to the bottom of the stage, sign me up. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, Pokemon Puzzle League, Columns, you name it. So of course, if you know me as well as you think you do, then Yoshi is a natural choice. Yoshi is the fundamental therapeutic game for me on the NES. You want to know why? Let the game tell you why. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is the most split game on the NES on the internet in my opinion. If you like the music, the nostalgia, or the platforming gameplay, you're probably on the love side. Meanwhile, if you criticize it for its faults, exploits, and unbalanced gameplay like Donatello's exploitable bow staff or the underwater dam level, you probably despise it. To be honest, the negatives don't bother me like the dam level because I played the game so much I can work around them. With that aside, I love the mix of adventure and platforming mechanics. It is silly because it has moon physics platforming, but there is a surprising amount of depth to the combat here. Random enemies appear, increasing the replayability and suspense of the battles, plus the exploration of the overworld. It is a nice touch. At the end of the day, I think the ambition behind this title has aged really well. Now let me go on record and say I'm not a Kirby fan. I don't play his games. I love Kirby 64 with the innovation of mixing multiple power-ups, but I wish this series did more of that rather than suck an enemy and get his power-up mechanic. The series is too simple and samey for my taste. But I will admit that this game is an exception because of the aesthetics, and I feel Kirby's simplistic nature works the best for the NES. Kirby's Adventure is one of those games where it lulls you in with the charm, and it's hard to put it down because the game hypnotizes you to keep playing. I like the amount of options you have to decimate your opponents. It feels good with the fast pace. I think the mini games are hilarious, like the dueling minigame being my favorite, and overall it's a game that just makes you happy. If you remember my top 25 Sega Genesis games, I said that the top 4 video games are priceless gems to me and will always be near and dear to my heart. Well, guess where we are? Because these top 4 Nintendo games are branded into my childhood and are still gleaming bright into my adulthood. Alright, let's go. Everybody had Super Mario Bros. 2 growing up, which gave me a lot of chances to replay it and get attached to it. I love everything about it. The 4 different playstyles, the potions that whisk you off to another dimension, the different obstacles like the bombs or sand pits. I love grabbing that key to get chased by Creepy Face here. I love the Birdos and bosses. It's phenomenal. Everyone had this game growing up and I couldn't get enough of playing it whenever I could. It's one of those few games where my nostalgia is unshakable and untouchable. I'll love it to the next dimension and beyond, always and forever. I lead a simple life. I see enemies, I approach enemies, then I kill enemies. Boom. That's how you keep me satisfied. So if I love beat 'em up games like Streets of Rage or one-man army games like Dynasty Warriors, I'm an action gamer. Then it only makes so much sense why this is here. Beyond that, that is a good question. Nostalgia aside, what should I praise the simple beat 'em up for? I thought hard, and it's because of the charm of how much the environment interacts with you, both with how the themes of the levels change and the enemy set pieces. I honestly don't think another beat 'em up rivals TMNT 3 in that regard. I also like the combination of strategies available to you. You can pole vault an enemy over your head to hurt the enemy behind you, you can jump kick, do a normal attack, or sacrifice a bit of health to do your turtle special attack. Overall, I appreciate the environmental factors, the balance, the themes of the levels, the bosses, the set pieces, the different enemies, the strategies. To me, it's an eternal classic. I always get nervous talking about this game on the internet because of its weird first impressions. I've seen it get picked on numerous times for its odd execution and gameplay. Much like Punch-Out or Adventure of Link, what stands it out for me is its one-of-a-kind concept, using faces to match up the color of the gems and remove them. It's so creative! It's such a bold and out-of-this-world imaginative concept that it left this deep impression within me and just flourished like a beautiful flower of connection with this game, and it kept growing. On the nostalgic, technical, and ambitious concept, I can't bring myself to ever be tired of it. The puzzles are tough even by today's standards, keeping the replayability up. The obstacles are different and keep you very alert. It's aged masterfully for my taste and still remains one of my top 20 favorite video games of all time. So instead of honorable mentions, I wanted to do something else. I'm sure some viewers were anticipating some popular games to make this list, but they didn't, like Mega Man or Castlevania. It's not fair. It wouldn't be right to leave those questions unanswered. I'll list 5 popular games viewers were expecting and why they did not make the list. Brace yourself though, they didn't make the list after all. Number 1 is The Legend of Zelda. I did my first proper playthrough of Zelda 1 in 2014, so I have no nostalgia with it. and I admit, it's a really good game. I enjoyed playing it with the randomizer especially, but it suffers from an archaic grid-like control system. It's easy to memorize where everything is if you're not randomizing it, leading to a lack of replayability in my opinion. And top-down games are not close to being my favorite compared to other NES genres. Number 2 is the Megaman series. I played through a good amount of Mega Man's 1, 2, and 3 and I don't like it. I don't like anything about it. I think the running, jumping, and shooting is janky. I don't think the power-ups are that fun or practical. I think the levels are dumb, like the disappearing platforms is one example. And I don't think the bosses are that interesting. Many do like it, but not every video game series is for everyone. And unfortunately, I'm not one of them. Number 3 is Castlevanias 1 and 3. The knockback and stiffness of the characters is annoying, the stairs, especially in Castlevania 3, is aggravating and it can go to hell. I will say, however, that Castlevania 1 was close to making this list, probably around number 30, so I do like it. But I can't excuse my large share of frustrations I have with it. Control is one of my biggest factors in enjoying video games, and control is not Castlevania's strong suit. Number 4 is Ducktales. I tried it from a lot of recommendations and I appreciate the invite, I don't get it. I'm not a fan of Scrooge McDuck and it's monotonous to me to continually keep bouncing off everything with the pogo stick. I'm guessing a lot of viewers were expecting me to give it a free pass because of the moon music, but no. It's a games countdown, not a music countdown. Number 5 is Metroid. Frankly, it's outdated in my opinion compared to the later games. There's no map, the corridors, especially the vertical ones, are so unnecessarily bloated. And I feel that Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, and especially Metroid Zero Mission, the remake, make their games more enjoyable because of their superior controls, level design, and mechanics. Oh come on, you saw this coming. In retrospect though, it's actually quite tough to say why Super Mario Bros. 3 is the best NES game ever. It's fluid, it's fast, it's cool, it's platforming, but so are a lot of other NES games if you think about it. However, there is one word I remember as a kid coming across this game for the first time. Massive. Usually games just went from one stage to the next without conveying how big the game is. Not this game. It lets you know from the get-go you're in for one big adventure from the overworlds. There's also the pacing and diversity of the gameplay that deserves its praise. You can get items from the mushroom houses, can match up pictures, play a card game, fight some Hammer Brothers, and of course the different themes of each world guarantees that you will not get bored of this game. Also, the randomizer and mod support for this game is noteworthy, so it has a lot of ways to shake it up if you want new things to do. One last thing I gotta say is how the game encourages a relationship with you. As you grow up, you get better, and then you get farther into the game exploring more of its secrets. Using the hammer on World 2 to open up a secret route, coming across the rare items like the frog suit and the tanuki suit, or even coming across the warp whistles that could lead you to the last world in an instant. And that's why I gotta give it the credit it deserves. The longevity, keeping things fresh with options, 2 players of course, the scope of the game. It did everything right to make it the masterpiece of its time, to make it my favorite NES game of all time.